Hi, I'm Sam Pettingill from the Student Loan Help Group, and I'm here with Patti Ogilvie. We're both senior enrollment counselors here at the Student Loan Help Group, and we'll be talking to you today about teacher loan forgiveness.
Hi there, I'm Patti Ogilvie. Sam, like you said, we're going to talk about teacher loan forgiveness today. What is the teacher loan forgiveness program?
So teacher loan forgiveness is a federal government program. It started back in 1998, actually, and it allows teachers who teach in a Title I school for 5 consecutive years to receive forgiveness on a portion of their loans. So Patti, what is needed to qualify for forgiveness under teacher loan forgiveness?
For teacher loan forgiveness, it requires that you work 5 consecutive years at a Title I school full-time while having your full state teaching certification for all 5 of those years. And you have to have your bachelor's in the area that you're teaching as well. One of the other requirements is that you could not have had a loan balance on October 1st, 1998. So those are the requirements. And to find out if your school is eligible, the Department of Education has a web page that we search for that person's actual school. And if they're a Title I school, they're going to be on the list. If they're not on that list, then they're not going to be eligible for teacher loan forgiveness.
Yes, that's the teacher cancellation low income directory, right?
That is correct, TSLHG directory. And a lot of times we'll have difficulty finding somebody's school on there because if you don't put it in exactly right, then it will kick, like it just won't come up. So our little trick is like we just put like the first few letters of the person's school in there, and then you'll get everything that kind of falls under that category and pick it up and find out how the DOE is listing it exactly, which is, which can be challenging for a lot of people. It's challenging for us sometimes because you don't want to tell somebody, no, your school's not Title I, and then, you find it later. So we definitely go above and beyond to make sure that the school is actually eligible.
Definitely.
Sam, now I know that a lot of people have questions about consolidating their loans when it comes to teacher loan forgiveness. So tell us a little bit about that.
So there's been a lot of discussion about consolidation recently, especially with the changes for public service loan forgiveness, that maybe consolidating your loans might be something that you need to do. The one thing to keep in mind with teacher loan forgiveness, you don't have to have a specific loan type in the sense that FFELP loans, which are excluded from public service loan forgiveness, are allowed for teacher loan forgiveness. So there's no need to consolidate your loan to make it a direct loan, for example, so that you can qualify for teacher loan forgiveness. And in fact, consolidating your loans for TLF can actually hurt you, simply because the consolidation is considered a new loan by the Department of Education. And the loan must be taken out either during or prior to the 5 years of service that you're using. So for example, if you've already taught 5 years in a Title I school and you consolidated your loans this year, you would have to complete another year of service in order to qualify again for teacher loan forgiveness, because now it's a new loan in the eyes of the DOE. So it's actually important not to consolidate your loans with teacher loan forgiveness unless there's some compelling reason to do that, which there generally isn't.
Very good.
So Patti, does a teacher's 5 years of service have to be at the same school? Would I need to be at the same school all 5 of those consecutive years?
No, Sam, you wouldn't have to be at the same school, but you would have to have 5 consecutive years at a Title I school. So for example, let's say I have 4 years in working for a Title I school, then I take another job, but that school also is Title I. I won't lose any of my 5-year time period because there's no gap in my employment. However, let's say that I worked 4 years and then I took a year off, and then I went either back to that school or to a new school. My 5 years would have to start over at year number 1 because the key is it has to be 5 consecutive years. Otherwise, the DOE will deny you.
Gotcha. So even if I needed to kind of cobble it together out of 2 or 3 different schools over that 5 years, it would be fine as long as they're all Title I, right?
That is exactly right. So as long as there's no gap in the employment and all the schools are Title I, you literally could have, 7 different schools. But as long as there's no gap in that employment, that's really important, as well as the fact, of course, that it's got to be a Title I school. So it doesn't matter how many schools you've been with, The key is, were they consecutive years and were they eligible as a Title I school?
Gotcha.
Now, Sam, can people receive loan forgiveness under both teacher loan forgiveness and public service loan forgiveness? I know that's a question that we get all the time, and it's very confusing for a lot of people.
It is. And you can receive both teacher loan forgiveness and public service loan forgiveness, but there's a couple of things to keep in mind if you're planning to do that. The first thing is that generally speaking, the Department of Education doesn't allow you to count the time twice. You can't double count both the public service loan forgiveness time and the teacher loan forgiveness time. So for example, if you were paying on an income-driven payment plan, working toward teacher loan forgiveness, and you were 9 years into your 10 years of payments for PSLF, and then you received teacher loan forgiveness. Generally speaking, that 5 years of time that was used for teacher loan forgiveness will now come out of the time that was used for PSLF. So now you'd be back at 4 years of time for PSLF, and that might not be worth it, especially if you're only getting $5,000 off of your loans, depending on where your balance is. That's really setting you back because PSLF would have forgiven the entire balance once you hit that 10 years, the 120 payments.
No, let me ask you this, Sam.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Why would somebody go for teacher loan forgiveness as opposed to public service loan forgiveness? Like, what would be like a red flag to you, or a flag that would pop up when you looked at their loans? Like, what would kind of direct you which direction?
Well, the loan balance is one really important factor. Obviously, if you have a low balance of something like $10,000 or $15,000 and you haven't made any qualifying payments up to this point for PSLF, you probably won't get to your 120 qualifying payments before you pay off your balance. So in that case, you should probably just do teacher loan forgiveness if that's an option for you. For people with a very high balance, say you have a balance over $100,000, it doesn't really make sense to use the 5 years of teacher loan forgiveness because $5,000 coming out of that 100,000 wouldn't really make a lot of sense. So in that case, public service loan forgiveness is a clear winner. I have seen some cases where you have someone that maybe you just graduated with, say, an advanced degree, you just got a master's degree. I just spoke with someone recently in that situation, and you already have your 5 years of teaching service. Maybe you would want to go ahead and apply and get that teacher loan forgiveness right at the beginning. And then if there's still enough balance left to justify public service loan forgiveness, maybe go that route. But at least you've gotten the teacher loan forgiveness out of the way. You've gotten something taken off of your loan balance. That sometimes is an option.
Right.
And right now, if you've actually already taken teacher loan forgiveness during the limited waiver, that time can still be counted. So for example, that example that I gave before, where you had 9 years toward PSLF, and then all of a sudden you decided to take teacher loan forgiveness, and that wiped out 5 years. Right now, because of the limited waiver, if everything is done correctly, that time will still be allowed to count, but only during the limited waiver. So
Right.
this is a really important time. If you have used teacher loan forgiveness in the past and you have a large balance left and you want to go with public service loan forgiveness, this is the time to do it.
Right, because that waiver is over in October 2022. So if they want to know if they can capitalize on, both programs, now would be the time to look into it. Now, for teacher loan forgiveness, most teachers who are eligible for 5,000 unless they're an ESC certified special ed teacher, then they're eligible for 17,500. And then if they teach in middle school or high school, math or science, they'd be eligible for 17,500. Are there any other amounts that are available for teacher loan forgiveness, or are those just it?
So yeah, it would generally be the $5,000 unless you were those 3 categories that you mentioned: special education, middle school or high school math or science. Any of those 3 will be eligible for up to 17,500. And with special education, it's very important to remember that it's not enough just to be certified as a special education teacher. You also have to be actually performing the duties of a special education teacher. Your school has to consider you to be a special education teacher that entire 5 years. So that's important to remember too.
Now, the other thing.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So
Yeah.
The other thing too is that a lot of people think that they're eligible for teacher loan forgiveness when in actuality they're not. We've run into somebody who was a speech pathologist, for example, at the school, or the school psychologist. I know it often depends on the school, how they deem them and how they fill out the employment certification. But generally speaking, those people are not eligible for teacher loan forgiveness. Is that correct?
Yes, you do have to be considered a classroom teacher, or you have to be providing classroom type instruction in a non-classroom setting. So a lot of times, like diagnostic professionals like that may not be included. I have seen cases, if you have a specialist, for example, I helped a client out in the Midwest who was a teacher for a school for the deaf and blind. And she actually, because her specialty was in students who were both deaf and blind, she was dealing with students in a small setting where she wasn't technically in a classroom. She would go to those students' classes, take those specific students out and teach just a couple of them at a time in a small non-classroom setting. That was considered eligible because she was still teaching subjects 30 hours a week. She was just teaching to a smaller population because these were students that had special needs and needed to be handled, a very, very small classroom setting with maybe 3 students at a time. So there are exceptions, but generally, if you're not providing classroom type teaching, you would not be eligible.
Now, I've seen and I've heard, and just to let everybody else know, that the DOE does not make this process very easy. Every time somebody submits their application, it eats up 3 to 6 months of their time before they even know if they're denied or not. Now, I've seen where people have tried to do it themselves and they've been denied because they missed a dash when the employment certification was filled out, or their signature was too light. Have you run into a lot of that with people that you've talked to who have tried to do it on their own?
Definitely. I mean, I think that's something that we've all seen here, that we talk to clients that have, maybe submitted the application on their own 2 or 3 times and not been successful. It can be really frustrating. If it's not entered exactly the same for the school name as it appears on the TSLI, that can be a problem. Or if the date format is not correct.
Right.
It's, anytime you're dealing with bureaucracy, there's going to be headaches.
Now, our team audits everything on the client's behalf before anything's ever submitted. So obviously they're not at risk of that same situation of being, denied because their signature wasn't too light, or wasn't dark enough. So that's the great thing about our team, is that, they've got the experience as well as the fact that they do audit every single thing. They don't just arbitrarily submit it once we get it back. So that's really great.
Yes. Yeah, we're doing all the heavy lifting for them. So I think that really takes a lot of the worry and stress out of it for most people.
And the follow-ups and the babysitting, and they could turn
Yeah.
into a full-time job just doing that on your own.
That's true. Now, Patty, there are some types of loans that aren't eligible, and there's some situations involving people's loans that that might create problems. Can you talk maybe a little bit about that? Like, for example, what if my loan was in default? Would I still be eligible for teacher loan forgiveness?
The first course of action would be that you have to get back into good standing. So once you're back in good standing and out of default, then you may be eligible for the teacher loan forgiveness. Because once you're back in good standing and no longer considered in default, then you are able to work towards any of the federal forgiveness programs. But as long as you're in default, you are not eligible for any of these programs. Also, Parent Plus loans, they're not eligible for teacher loan forgiveness. So that's something else to consider as well.
That's true. And from what I understand, Perkins loans are also not eligible. Is that true?
Right. That is right. That is correct. And so down the road, if they have a Perkins loan that was, consolidated or something, it's no longer a Perkins loan, then that would be an option. But if it still shows as a Perkins loan, then that would not be eligible for teacher loan forgiveness.
Gotcha.
Now, so Sam, what should somebody do if they, want to see if they are eligible for teacher loan forgiveness? What's the best way to move forward for them?
Well, the best option would be to get signed up for a consultation with us, because then, one of the enrollment counselors like you and me would be able to take a look at their situation, figure out exactly what they are qualified for, and be able to give them the best possible advice, especially with all of the complications right now with public service loan forgiveness entering the picture. It really does change some things for some people. So it's better to have kind of a comprehensive evaluation from someone who knows exactly all the ins and outs of the program.
Right, because we're going to look their loans up when they have their consultation. We'll look their loans up on the studentaid.gov site, and we'll be able to see all their loans in one place. And we're going to be able to tell them exactly what they are eligible for and what they're not, and what needs to be done. So I think that is the best advice, is to have that consultation and let us, the experts, take a look. Because if we can't do anything, we'll be the first one to tell them that they're not eligible. And maybe we can, suggest an alternative.
Absolutely.
So that's great. So I know that last time we talked about public service loan forgiveness. Today, we're talking about teacher loan forgiveness. I believe in the future, our next segment that we'll be talking about is going to be about different types of federal student loan payments. So that's something that everyone can look forward to. We'll touch base on that, and we'll go into a little bit about that next time around.
Great. That's definitely a good thing to talk about, especially with the CARES Act winding down in the next month or so, starting to think about repayment.
Right. Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Sam, for all the information.
Yeah, thank you, Patty. It's been really helpful, I'm sure, for everyone out there wondering a little more about teacher loan forgiveness.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, have a great day, everyone.
You too.